When the Gospel of Mark and also the letters of Peter talk about peace, I find myself reflecting on a meditation of Dr. King when he was reflecting on the, interestingly enough, parable of the Good Samaritan. He said of the people who passed by the man who was beaten on the side of the road, when the offer came for them to help, they asked to themselves, what will happen to me if I help this person? But the Good Samaritan, the Samaritan man who came by, when he saw this person beaten on the side of the road, he asked of himself a different question. What will happen to him, this person, if I do nothing and leave him here? Will he receive help? And I think that what Dr. King was pointing out about that passage in the story that Jesus tells us there is that in order for us to live into God's love, we need to find ways in which we can fundamentally change the way in which we are, the way in which we perceive the world around us, because the way in which those first couple of travelers saw the world is very normal. We have an inclination to look out for ourselves, to worry about ourselves. It takes a lot of soul searching and transformation to become the type of people who are able to think about others and to put them first when we are most able. And so what we hear about today, in particular at the start of the Gospel of Mark, is John the Baptist offering the people of Judea and Jerusalem an opportunity to start a transformation process, to be baptized into the peace of God, which I think is a different type of peace than what you and I probably are used to and are comfortable with. When we think of peace, we probably think about our lives here in Vermont, which for the most part are pretty secure, and we for the most part have what we need. Maybe it's not a perfect peace. We look out into the world and we see that people are suffering, but I hear from a lot of people, Vermont is a kind and peaceful place. The question we need to ask ourselves is that true for us as much as it is true for everyone else? And I think that that is the question of peace that John the Baptist is inviting the people of Israel to consider. Can we transform ourselves into the type of people who don't just bring peace into our own lives, but bring peace to all of God's children in the world? That takes hard work. It takes us considering whether or not we are doing what we can to be the type of peaceful people that God needs in order to spread God's love to all the places that it is needed. And I think that the gift that Christ gives us, that we honor this second Sunday of Advent, is a type of gift that brings that transformational process into our lives. How can we transform ourselves into the type of peaceful people who recognize where that peace is needed most within the world? I think that we are very aware of places where peace is needed. When we look at what's happening in Gaza, when we look at the attack that happened in Israel, we can see that there are people who are suffering, and it is good for us to bring our love and our compassion to those people who are struggling. When we see the struggles that are happening, but Gaza and Israel are places that are attracting a lot of attention. And other places within the world may be harder for us to direct our attention and our love when it is needed just as much or just as badly. As I said last week, we're paying less attention to what's happening in Ukraine. It's been a very long time since people paid attention to what was happening in Ethiopia, Sudan, or Yemen. I bring these things up because these are wars that have been going on for a long time, and yet people, they don't get headlines. And Sarah was right to bring up our suffering neighbors here in the Burlington and Vermont area who are homeless and struggling through these seasons where it gets cold. I really do think our clergy colleagues in the Burlington metro area who are going to be having a vigil this Tuesday to raise awareness for those folks who are struggling with violence, hunger, addiction, and exposure to the elements. These are things that we do not necessarily see in our everyday lives because we have peace for ourselves. But again, peace for just ourselves is not God's peace. And that is what Jesus, that is what John, that is what Peter are telling us. We need to strive for something more. We need to strive for something more expansive and more inclusive. We within the church have accepted that baptism of transformation. We have accepted the responsibility of trying to be a people who can be peaceful and loving and lift up the needs of our neighbors who are in need. And we've accepted the responsibility of starting that transformation process within ourselves. A church should be a place where people can undergo that process, surrounded by people that love and support them, and will try to guide them in the right direction. The church does not always do that, because the church itself is subject to that desire to find peace just for itself, advantage just for itself, and we need to overcome that. And one of the things that I admire about this congregation is that we try. We try in the places where we are able to see a need to change. And, you know, my hat goes off to Jay, and safe travels as well, and to Barry for helping us to expand and also hats need to go off to Kelly there too, for helping us expand our online presence and to try to share this message of love with people who engage differently with the world now that we are in a computer age, now that we're in the 21st century, in the century of TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. I know that not everybody is familiar with those platforms, but sometimes you need to reach out to let God's peace be known. And you know what? Sometimes even folks who are millennials like me and familiar with a lot of these apps that people are communicating with need to be reminded. Jerry, at our worship committee meeting a little while ago, pointed out, well, you're reaching out to all these different apps and platforms, but have you done Front Porch Forum? Or even the newspaper? And I'm like, oh, you're right. Those are ways in which we can be sharing God's peace too. God's peace can be shared through a multiple of different methods. And it's important for us to open our minds and our hearts to the ways in which people receive that peace and communicate and are able to have that peace communicated to them. But it means that we need to be willing to change ourselves, change our ways of doing things, and to walk paths that we have never walked before. What John the Baptist is calling the people of Israel to do is to walk a path that changes their understanding of what it means to be peaceful people. Not just to look out for peace for the people of Israel, but to look out for peace of all people within all the world, because all people in the world are God's children. If we accept that responsibility and that path of transformation, then we don't have an easy road ahead of us. Because that means that we're going to have to be very critical, not just of the world around us, but of ourselves. But it is during seasons like this that we remember that task was given to us as a gift. Because ultimately we are being invited into the peace of God. Not just for others around us, but for ourselves as well.